Hello everyone, I'm Alicia. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a matching sugar skull bracelet to go along with the rings that I already have a video on. If you haven't seen the video for these sugar skull rings, I will leave a link for it down there in the description bar. So I made these are actually bangles, with the flat spiral stitch. Now, there are a lot of flat spiral stitch videos out there on YouTube, and if you go around and look, everybody's pretty much doing the same exact thing. They're using round beads and bicones and only one color of seed beads. And if you watch a lot of my videos, then you would know that I love to use colors because it just makes the piece so much more interesting to use more than one color. So I made these to match the rings, and I used the same size beads in the bracelets as I did in the rings, except for the skull bead. Of course, I'd use a smaller skull bead. Now, first I had created this one, and I didn't have enough beads to make a second one for the video, so I had to go online and buy some more skull beads, and these are the ones I had bought online, and as you can see, they are smaller. I couldn't find the same size that I bought here. These are 7 by 9 millimeter, and these are 6 by 8. And I actually like the small ones more. They're so cute. But they both look good. So, I also wanted to try the flat spiral stitch. Instead of just with skulls, I also wanted to try it with other beads. And so I used my rose beads here that I bought from Joann's. I bought these on sale. I got these from Joann's. They are acrylic or resin rose beads, and I measured them with my caliper, and they're 8 millimeters around. I'm gonna go ahead and sit this down and talk to you about this bracelet here. These are 8 millimeters around rose beads, and I wanted to do all roses, and then I realized I couldn't do them side by side because of how the roses shape. The petals, they don't sit good against each other, so I had to put a round bead in there, and the round bead had to be small enough, as you can see, that the petals would overlap it, so I used 6 millimeter beads. And then I realized that I wanted to do less rose beads because sometimes less is more, and not just that, but I didn't want to use up all of my rose beads in one bracelet. So what I did then was I did 3 6 millimeter beads and then my 8 millimeter rose bead. Now, because I'm using an 8 millimeter bead, I had to increase my seed bead count. So back here where I had started, I had big gaps. So I then realized that I should do an 8 for my center bead. So this is a 6 millimeter, this is 8 millimeter, 6, and this is 8. Repeating that all the way throughout the entire bracelet. So that's my measurements for this. So if you're able to find 8 millimeter beads, do a 6 millimeter, an 8 millimeter, a 6 millimeter, all rounds, and then your flower bead. Okay, and this here is 7.5 inches long, and I used 5 roses. Okay, and this clasp here is also a rose clasp, and I also found that at Joann's Crafts. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to make this flat spiral stitch with skull beads. And these here are bangles. These are continuous all the way around. I don't think anybody else has ever shown how to do a bangle with a flat spiral stitch. But really, I have found that just about any bracelet that I've designed can be turned into a bangle. You just have to figure out how to connect the ends so it looks right. Now, for this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to do this colorway here. This was the other color that I had purchased online. These are also 6 by 8 millimeter skull beads, and when I bought them, they came on a strand of a 16-inch strand, which was a really nice amount, because if you go to Michael's, there's short strands of skull beads that you can buy there. But these are pretty good quality. They're halite, and there's 2 different places you can buy these from on Amazon. You can get them straight through Amazon Prime, and that's 2-day shipping, but they are $5.99 a strand, and I thought that was a little expensive. So I found them from the same company on Amazon, but it wasn't 2-day shipping. I had to wait for my shipping. So to save money, I bought them for something. I don't remember the exact change amount, but it was $4 and some change a strand. But I had to wait a week and a half for them to arrive. They didn't arrive on the date that they said they would. They arrived 6 days after the date they were supposed to be here. So that's why this video is so far out. But anyways, other than having to wait a while for them, they're pretty good quality. And if you do want them to your house fast, just order them through Amazon Prime. Okay, so let's get started making these. I'm going to show you how to do the bangle version and the bracelet version. And by the way, I do my bracelet of flat spiral stitch differently than some other people I've seen. If you've ever made a flat spiral stitch bracelet before, they're really cool. But the end here, these here will flip over and they'll lay to one side. But I've created the end right here in a way that won't let it stay like that. As you can see, it flips over, but then it flips right back because of how I created this end here to keep them separated. So I'm going to show you guys how to do the flat spiral stitch with skull beads. It's really cool, and also we're using several different sizes and colors of seed beads. Here is the list of materials you will need to make sugar skull bangles or bracelets. You will need 9 feet of either 10-pound or 8-pound Fireline. Now, the reason why I say 10-pound is because the howlite beads are pretty heavy, and if you're making a bangle instead of a bracelet, it's going to be even more heavier. So I really love the 10-pound weight for this because of the strength and the durability we will get from the 10-pound. Now, let's say you don't have 10-pound, and I normally use this for my wrap bracelets because it's so strong. You really need that strength for wrap bracelets. Now, let's say you don't have 10-pound and you have 8-pound, then just go ahead and use the 8-pound if you already have it on hand. You're also going to need a ruler and a size 10 beading needle. You're also going to need skull beads, and of course, like I've already told you, there's different sizes. These were 6 by 8 and these are 7 by 9. And the rose beads, if you decide to use rose beads, these are 8mm rose beads, and I found them at Joann's. You can also buy these online. I've seen them all over Amazon. Now, I can't tell you how many skull beads you'll need or rose beads because it just depends on if you're making a bangle or a bracelet, and also because of all the different sizes you can use, it's hard to tell you how many you'll need. So that's something you'll have to figure out on your own. Now, I can give you a tip. If you want to make a bangle, and let's say you don't have a lot of beads on hand, what you could do is, if they're not already on a strand, you can go ahead and string them onto a monofilament fishing line and measure it to see how long it is. If you think you have a small amount and you're not sure how many you will need, you just go ahead and measure it and see if you'll have enough for a bangle or a bracelet. Now, of course, you'll need a lot more for a bangle than you would a bracelet, but that's just a little tip I had there, is to go ahead and string it and measure it to see how many you have, to see if you have enough for a bracelet or a bangle. Now, you're also going to need 11O seed beads, and I have 2 colors here, and 8O seed beads, and 6O seed beads. Now, I know some of you don't have 8Os because it's hard to find them where you live. A lot of you are watching me in a different country. So if you don't have 8O seed beads and you can't find them, you could just use 10Os or 11Os in place of them. So then you would have 3 different colors of 11Os and then 1 color of the 6Os. Okay, so this is the list of materials, and remember, I always put the list down there in the description bar so you could see everything you need. And also, I'm going to put a link to where I got my skull beads at, and I'm also going to put a link to where I buy my Fireline. I get asked a lot where I buy my Fireline at. I used to buy it at Walmart because I don't know if the price has changed, but I used to get a 125 yard spool for $15 at Walmart, and Kmart. They have the same price. They might have changed though because it's been a couple years since I've bought it. But I'm now buying my Fireline on Amazon because I can get a 300 yard spool, and I like the bigger spools. And I will leave a link for this, like I said, down there in the description bar so you can check that out. But if you don't like shopping online, the best place to get Fireline at is at Walmart or Kmart in the fishing and tackle area. It's not going to be in the bead section. If you go to the bead section in Walmart, you'll find not Fireline, you'll find Wildfire, but I think it's like only 25 yards. That's nothing. I would just go through that in a week. So it's a lot better deal to go to the fishing supply area and get it cheaper there. Okay, again, this is all the stuff you'll need. Check there in the description bar to see everything. So I went ahead and I threaded my needle onto my thread, and I'm not going to make another full-length bracelet. I'm just going to do a little short sample piece just to show you guys how to make this stitch with the skull beads, and then I'll go to my actual bracelet and show you how to close this up into a bangle. Now, something I have to tell you that's very important. When you first start out your bangle and your bracelet, you have to measure your tail thread, because if you don't have the right amount of tail thread by the time you get to closing this bracelet up or putting a clasp on it, then you might have to take it apart, and you don't want to deal with that. So if you are making a bangle, you need to leave an 8-inch tail, okay? Because by the time you get to the other end of your bangle, you're probably going to have about an 8 or 9-inch tail, and you need to have about the same amount on both ends. You don't want to be short on one end. Alright? Now, if you're making a bracelet, you have to add a clasp in this, so of course you're going to need a longer tail. So if you're making a bracelet, to do this part here, you will need to have a 12-inch tail. So again, if you're making a bangle, you will need to leave an 8-inch tail. If you're making a bracelet, in order to add the clasp on, you will need to leave a 12-inch tail. Okay, so I'm not going to so much worry about measuring my tail in this, because like I said, I'm just going to do a little sample piece. I'm not going to make another bracelet. I'm just going to be closing up that bracelet. I just want to do a little sample piece showing you guys how to do this stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up my 2 center beads, which are my skull beads. You need 2 of these. Slide these down. Okay, and again, if you're doing a bangle, what I like to do is measure my thread like this, find where 8 inches is at, and then I hold my beads there in the 8-inch mark, and I pick up my seed beads, and then I pass through that, and then I measure it again to make sure it stays at 8 inches if you're making a bangle. And again, if you're doing a bracelet, you have to leave a 12-inch tail. I cannot stress this enough. Okay, so I have my 2 beads here. And like I said, I'm just doing a sample of the stitch, so I'm going to make my tail a little bit shorter because I'm not actually going to complete this. Now I'm going to pick up my sequence of seed beads, and you have to pick up the correct amount to make sure it fits good around your skulls. With this one here, when I first made this one, I had to do 4 11-ohs, an 8-oh, a 6-oh, an 8-oh, and 4 11-ohs again. These again are 7 by 9 millimeter skull beads. Now these are smaller, so I had to decrease my seed bead count. So all I did was just took out 2 11-oh seed beads. So I have 3 11-ohs, a 8-oh, a 6-oh, 8-oh, and 3 11-ohs. So because these are the same size, 6 by 8, I'm going to pick up 2 yellow, 1 silver, 1 8-oh, 1 6-oh, then I'm going to go backwards. 8-oh, 11-oh, and 2 of these 11-ohs. That's my color pattern. And again, make sure you have your tail right. Pass the needle through your two skull beads. Hold your tail. Place just like this. So now you would go ahead, pull this tight. Go ahead and measure this. Make sure you have an 8-inch tail if you're doing a bangle, or 12-inch if you're doing a bracelet. And again, I'm not going to finish this into a bracelet. I'm actually going to take this apart because I have one there that I will show you how to complete. So now that I have this done, one side, I have to do my other side. So again, I'm going to pick up 2 11s in this color, another 11 there in a different color, 1 8, 1 6, 1 8, 1 11 in that color, and 2 11s in this color. Okay, now I have to pass through the skull beads in this direction here, and you have to position them looking in the correct direction because they do want to spin around when you first start doing this stitch. Okay, so go ahead and pull that through, lay this off to the side, and pull this tight. Now, because I'm doing a bangle, I found that I like the stitch tight. Because of how this is, when this is tight, it's really nice as a bangle. If you want it looser, you could add more seed beads to make it looser on the side, but I kind of like this more for a bracelet. You could see how flexible this is as a bracelet, but because I did the weave tighter on this, it's more stiffer. See how nice it is as a bangle? It's really nice. So pulling this tight, you could see that we have a nice gap here for our next skull bead to sit in, and another gap here. So now I'm going to pick up a new skull bead. Since I have both sides done, I'm going to pick up just one skull bead, slide that down, and then I'm going to pick up my seed beads. So I have 2 yellow, one of the silver color, 1 8, 1 6, 1 8, and 11, and 2 of these 11s. So just like that, and slide those down the needle so they don't fall off. Now try to keep this skull face in the same direction as the other ones you just added, and take the needle and pass through this skull bead right here and through this one, okay? So just like this, passing through these 2 beads. Hold these in place as you pull your thread through, and go back and pull your tail tight because we don't need this to loosen up. Okay, so now it looks like that. Now I'm going to add the other side over here, and what I like to do is I like to go right, left when I add my seed beads. I first add the right side, then the left side. Try to keep that the same as you go adding the bracelet, so you don't have any twisting problems, okay? So I'm picking up 2 11s of that color, 1 11 of that color, 8-0, 6, 8-0, 8-0, 11-0, and 2 of these yellow 11-0s. Okay, I'm going to slide these down. I have one side here added. I'm going to add the other side. I'm going to take my needle and pass through these 2 skull beads. And before I pull that through, I'm just going to tighten my working tail there because it loosens up some, and then pull this through. Make sure this is laying on the right side, the correct side, and then pull that tight. So now we have that. Okay, so again, we're just going to add another skull bead because we have completed both sides there. So pick up another skull, slide that all the way down, pick up 2 11s of one color, another 11 of a different color, an 8-0, 6-0, an 8, another 11, and 2 of these here. Just like that. Slide this down the needle, and then pick this up again. Hold the skull facing you. You don't want it to turn backwards, and pass the needle through these 2 skull beads. Just like that. I like to pull this snug again, and then I pull this through. Okay, so now we have one side there done, and I'm going to do the other. And again, pick up 2 11-0s in this color, 11 of a second color, and then an 8, a 6, an 8, 11-0, and 2 of these here. Just like that. Slide this down, pass through these 2 skull beads. Okay, pull this snug again, make sure it's not loose, and then pull this through, and make sure that these are laying on the right side before you pull this tight. Just like that. And I like to go like this and pull it tight to make sure they're all laying right. And I haven't had any problems with these turning left and right. And I think it's because I have the stitch tight. Like I was telling you, I kept the stitch tight for the bangles because I like how stiff it is. And it also prevents the skull from turning left and right. Now, I don't have a problem with this being loose with the flowers because of how the flower is thin, skinny there at the bottom, and then it flares out. So I have no issue with that. But the skull bead is kind of an oval shape, so it can turn left or right if you don't have a tight stitch. Okay, so I've just completed that there. I have to add another skull bead because I have both sides done. And every time I pick up a skull bead, I always pick it up from the chin part instead of the top of the head. Because if you look at this, the top of the head is right here where the 6-0s are at, and then the skinny part's here, and then once it's all complete, it just fits the skull right, just right with how I have it designed. Okay, so make sure you start out picking from the chin. I forgot to mention that at the very beginning. Okay, so I just picked up another skull bead, and now I'm going to pick up my seed beads again. 2 11s of this color, 1 11 of another color, my 8-0, 6-0, 8-0, 11-0 of this color, and 11-0s of my yellow. Okay, slide this down, hold my skull bead in place, and pass the needle through both of these. Just like this, and pull tight. And there we go. Now I'm going to do the other side. I have this side done, now to do the other side. I'm going to pick up 2 11-0s in yellow, 1 11-0 in silver, my 8, my 6, 8, 11-0, that color, and 11-0 of the yellow, just like that. Slide this down, hold this up. I'm going to take my needle and pass through these 2 skull beads. Before I pull my needle through, though, I like to pull that snug. Pull this through, and before you pull it too tight, make sure that it's laying on the correct side, just like that, and then pull this tight. And there we go. Okay, so again, pick up 2 11s of one color, 1 11 of a different color, and the 8-0, 6-0, 8-0, 11-0, just like that. Oops, I forgot to pick up my skull bead. So again, after we complete the both sides there, then we have to pick up a skull bead, slide that down, all the way down, and then our seed beads, just like that. Slide those down, pass through these 2 skull beads here, holding the skulls between your fingers, and pull this through. I would like to experiment more with other bead shapes other than the skulls and the roses. There's probably some other really neat shapes that would work in this stitch. Okay, so I have one side here done, and I have to do my other side, so I'm going to pick up again 2 11s, that color, an 11 of that color, an 8, a 6, an 8, an 11 of that color, and 2 11s of my yellow. Slide this down, take the needle and pass through these 2 skull beads, just like that. Again, pull this snug, and then pull this through, flipping that over to the other side, just like that. That's what we have so far. Okay, now I just have 2 more skull beads to go, so I just completed both sides, so I'm picking up another skull bead. I'm going to take my needle, pick up 2 11s of that color, 11 of my second color, an 8-0, 6-0, 8-0, 11-0, and 2 more 11-0s, just like that. Slide this down, take the needle and pass through these 2 skull beads, and again, I like to have my first row on my right side, and then my second row is going to go to the left, so pick up 2 11s, that color, 11-0, my other color, an 8-0, 6-0, an 8-0, 11-0, and 2 11-0s, just like that, and slide that down. Now I'm going to take my needle and pass through these 2 skull beads, grab the needle and pull this through. Pull it tight, and we now have this. Okay, so now I have to add another skull bead because I have both sides done. My last one here, pick this up, slide that on down, all the way down. Pick up 2 11s of that color, 11-0 of my second color, an 8-0, 6-0, 8-0, 11-0, and 2 more 11s. Just like that. Slide that down. Take the needle and pass through my 2 skull beads, just like this. Pull this snug, and then pull this through. Pull that tight, and there we go. Now we have to do this side over here. So pick up 2 11-0s of one color, 11 over my second color, my 8-0, my 6-0, and then go backwards and pick up the same beads, just like that. Slide these down, take the needle, and pass through these 2 skull beads. Flip this to the other side and pull it tight. And there we go. This is how you do the stitch. So keep going, doing this stitch until you have your bracelet or bangle, whatever you're making, long enough, and then I'll show you what to do then. Okay, so if you're gonna make this into a bangle, you need to put this around the widest part of your hand, which is right here, okay, the widest part, and you need to make sure that both ends meet. And when they meet, then you are ready to close up your bangle. Now, this was really confusing when I first turned this stitch into a bangle, but I did manage it. Now if you study this pattern here, you could see my yellow seed beads, how they're at the chin. Well, you can't see the ones that are behind the head. You have to flip the bracelet over like that. These ones here are on top of the head in the back, the yellow. But in the front, the yellow seed beads are right at the chin. So in order to connect this side to this side, these yellow seed beads here need to be laying over top of these here, okay? So I have to take my needle and pass through this skull bead, but I have to come out the back and top of the head right here, and then I'm going to pick up my beads, and then I'm going to come around from the back, pick up my beads, and pass through these 2 here, but I have to exit out the back. And then I pick up my beads on this side, and I come around, and I go back through the chin, and I pass through these skull beads, okay? So again, these yellow seed beads here around the chin of this one needs to be laying on top of this one, okay? So, holding this like this, I'm going to take my needle and pass my needle through this 1 skull bead on this side of the bracelet, but I need to exit out the back. Okay, see my needle there? I'm going to come out the back, just like this, pull this, and here they go, they connect together. Now I'm going to pick up my seed beads. I'm going to pick up 2 yellow 11-0s, my 11-0 silver, my 8-0, my 6-0, 8-0, 11-0 and silver, and my 2 yellow 11-0s. Slide these down, keeping this kind of snug. Take the needle and pass through. Let me show you. Right here's the gap, okay? Where my thread is. I pull this snug. Now I have to take my needle and pass through this one and this one so this connects together better. So again, take the needle, pass through these 2 skull beads. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And this one, instead of coming out the top, I need to come out the back because I have to add my seed beads coming out the back. So if you have to, flip this over so you can see where you're coming out at when you come out the back. And my needle is bent and it's going a different direction. So maybe if I go this way. Okay, there I go. Okay, so now I'm coming out the back here. And I'm passing through these 2 skull beads. So I'm going to take my needle and pull that through. Here's my beads that I'm adding. Pull this together, and you can see that I have this side here complete. And you can't even tell where I added the beads at in this side. But this side over here, you could tell that we haven't added the beads yet because there's a gap right here. Okay, so make sure you pull this tight before you pick up more beads, and I just want to make sure that I'm not caught. Okay, so I am exiting right there out of the top of that skull. I wanted to make sure I wasn't passing through any of those seed beads by accident. Okay, now I'm going to pick up the rest of my seed beads. 2 yellow 11-ohs, 1 11-oh silver, 8-oh, 6-oh, 8-oh, 11-oh in silver, and 2 yellow 11-ohs. That's my pattern. Slide that down. Again, I'm exiting out of the top of this skull bead. Right here's where I join the two ends together. I'm going to take my needle, and I'm right-handed. I'm going to take my needle and pass my needle through this skull bead and through this one, because I need my new beads to sit right here. Because if you look at this here, you could just see these yellow seed beads. 4 yellow 11-oh seed beads, but over here I have it filled in. So to fill in this spot, I have to go through this skull and this skull. So it's best to hold these two skulls between your fingers when you do it. And by the way, you do not have to come out of the back skull now, the back of the skull. You can come out the top right here, because we're adding our last row of seed beads. So I'm going to pass through there, but before I do, I want to pull this tight one last time, because I won't be able to tighten it again later. And then I'm going to pull my thread all the way through. I'm going to make sure this tail doesn't get stuck. Okay? And pull this tight. And now that I have it tight, you cannot tell where we had it open at. It's so cool. I just love it. This is what the back looks like. It looks really good. Okay, so now we have to tie knots. And what I do is I only tie my knots in the middle beads, in the skull beads. And because of how the skulls are laying, I'm going to tie my knots going in this direction with this tail, and I can't go all the way around, but I get pretty close to doing it. And then I don't trim this off, but I leave the short little bit of tail sticking out, and then I'll put my needle on this tail and I'll go this way tying my knots. And the reason why I leave this tail over here is because if I didn't leave it, I get confused after tying so many knots, and I'll start going in the same direction that I already tied knots in, and I'll get stuck trying to go through those beads that already have knots. So I just leave my tail there as a little marker. It's just a little sign to let me know that I already tied knots on this side, so I go in this direction. So anyways, now I'm going to show you how to tie the knots. And it's just half-hitch knots. And I think I have to let the dog out, so give me a second. Okay, so we have to be careful when we tie the knots, because if we're not careful and take our time, we could catch onto other seed beads, and then the bracelet would be pulling in different directions, and we don't want that. So take your time, be careful that you don't catch on any other beads when you're doing this. Okay, so right now I'm exiting out of this skull bead right here. Now it's probably going to be hard to see on camera, but if you hold this at an angle, the bracelet, there is a little gap right here, okay? Right in here, where there's no beads. I put the needle through this hole, I pull it out the back of the bracelet, and then I gently pull this towards the center there of my bracelet, like that, so I can grab those threads. And then I take this needle, remove this, and if you look, there is another gap right here on the same side, straight across, okay? Right here. Can you see that tiny little hole? I'll put my needle through there. Now before I pass through the loop, I'm just going to flip this over and show you where I'm at. So back here, here's my thread. I'm going to take this and pull it down. It's just going around these center threads right here. I'm not catching onto any of those seed beads, okay? So I'm going to flip this back over. And be careful you don't catch your other tail. So I'm right here, and I'm just catching onto those center threads in the middle of my skulls. I'm making my loop, and I'm going to pass through the loop twice. 1, to gently slide this down and pull it tight. Now I'm going to pass through one skull bead. Okay. Skipping, I'm not passing through two at a time. I'm just going to do one at a time. Just like that. Pull this through. And I'm going to tie another knot. And again, if you turn your bracelet here at an angle, you could see there's a little hole right here. Pass through there. Make a loop. Make sure your loop doesn't go down into your bracelet. Hold on to it. And again, hold this at an angle and you could see there's another little hole, and it's hard for me to see it staring into the camera lens. But there is another hole that's right here. Okay, right beside that. There's nothing there. Pass through that. And again, I'm going to flip this back over to show you. Right here is my thread. See it right there? Right there. It's already going around my threads like I need it to, okay? Then take and pull this down a little bit. Pass the needle through this loop 2 times. Be careful you don't catch on any of those seed beads as you pull it down. Okay, so pull it down and pull it tight. Then pass the needle through the next skull bead. And wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Just like that. So I keep going, tying knots just like this. I'll do it one more time. Hold the bracelet at an angle and you can see a tiny little hole right here. Pass the needle down through that hole, not to catch on any seed beads. Hold the loop on the top, then take the needle and pass through the bottom here. You'll see another hole that you could pass through. Then pass through this 2 times. And before I pull it down, I'm just going to check and make sure. Okay, right there's my thread. It looks good. It's not catching. See right these seed beads right here? The thread will catch on these seed beads. And then when you pull the knot down, you'll be stuck on these little 11 seed beads. Okay, so pull that knot down, just like that. And then pass through the next skull bead. Sometimes you have to put your fingernail in there like this to push them apart. You may have to turn one face, if you can, to the side a little bit, or one skull to the side, so you can pass through, or you'll have to bend your needle. Which I do like working with a straight needle, but it seems like I always do a better job when my needle's bent. Okay? Just like that, and your knots are hidden. So keep going with this. I try to do as many knots as I can until I can't go any further, and then I'll just take my needle and I'll pass through several skull beads, maybe 4 if I can, and pull the needle through, and I'll leave the little tail sticking out, okay? And then I'll flip it over and I'll go to this side and I'll tie knots the same exact way. And like I said, I like to keep that little tail sticking out, because if I trim it off, I forget, I'm very forgetful, which direction I was going in, and I'll go back in the same direction and you tied knots in, and I'll get stuck in those knots. So just go ahead and do that. Finish tying your knots and you'll be all done, and you'll have a really awesome, unique bracelet that nobody else has. It's so cool. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to do the flat spiral bracelet. I'm going to show you how to make this, finish the ends here so you can put a clasp on it instead of doing it in a bangle way. And like I said at the beginning, finishing it like this prevents these from flipping over. They don't want to flip, they stay open at the ends, and I really like that. Alright, now pretend this is a finished bracelet. It's not small like it actually is. Let's pretend that it's finished. To close this end up, and my camera's driving me crazy. It sees these little skull faces, and it keeps, when I get close to the camera, it puts a circle around each face, and it thinks that it's a smiling person. It's actually really funny. Okay, so when you go to do the end, close up your end for your bracelet, you want to take your needle and pass through one of these seed beads here, either this one or that one, but you're only going to pass through one of them, okay? And then you're going to pick up 5 seed beads. Now you may have to pick up 7. It depends if you're using tenos. I used tenos in that one, but I think I did 5. Yeah, I did 5. Okay, so you'll probably be fine. So I'm picking up 5 seed beads, and then I'm taking my needle and I'm passing through this seed bead and through the one over here that I'm exiting out of. Just like that, okay? So pass through all of those, and then we have this little loop here, and I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to sew back through all of these seed beads. So I'm reinforcing it a second time. So I'm going to pass through this one here and through this one. Just like that. So I'm exiting out right here at the hole on the top of my skull bead. Just like that, okay? Pull that through. And I'm going to pull this tight. And now we have this. Now what I'm going to do to keep this from opening, the sides from flipping, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass down through 2 of these skull beads. Okay, so I'm exiting out of this seed bead right here at the center of the top of my skull, taking my needle, passing through these 2 skull beads, just like that. I'm going to take my needle and pass through these seed beads here on the side, and I have to make it up to the end of my bracelet. So I'm going through those there. I'm going to turn this and pass through these here, okay? But I'm only passing through this one yellow one. I'm not going to go through this yellow one right there, just through that last one there, okay? Pull this through so it looks like that. Now see, we have a little gap here, so to reinforce this end even more, I pick up 1 seed bead and I'm going to flip this because of the direction I have to sew in. I'm going to put the seed bead right here in that little gap. So I'm going to, again, pick up the seed bead, pass through these beads here, in the end, my ring got caught, just like that. Flip this over, pass through these 2 that are right here, okay, pass through those. I'm going to go back and straighten my little loop up there, pick up the seed bead, and pass through here. All of these seed beads here on the side. Okay, you can see how it sits in there. I'm going to pass through these here. And then I'm going to pass through this skull bead into my work. Going back into my work. Just like that. Okay, so now we have our end done there, and now all you have to do is tie your half hitch knots the same exact way we tied it on the bangle. And I forgot to mention, if you're making a bracelet with split rings, you will have to pick up your split ring with the seed beads. As you're picking up your seed beads to make your loop, you'll have to use excuse me. As you're picking up your seed beads to make your loop, you'll have to use your split ring right then and there. You'll have to pick it up then. But if you're doing jump rings, you would just add the jump rings after this is complete, after you have all your knots tied. So this is how you do the end of the bracelet, in pretending this is a full-length bracelet. Once you finish this side tying your knots, you'll have to do the same exact thing on this side to get that end there. Okay? So now we have a bracelet and a bangle. It's so cool. Something else I just realized that I should let you know, after you do this side here, you know, the seed beads here are on the top of the bracelet. You could clearly see both sides. When you go to do this side, half of your seed beads are on the back. So when you go to add the loop in your clasp on this side, you actually have to do it on the bottom. So you'll be holding it with the faces facing down, you'll be holding it with the back facing up, and you'll be doing the same exact thing on this side. But you're holding it, you know what I'm saying? You're holding it like this. So that makes more sense, because if you tried to hold it like this and then add this side, it would be really confusing. You'll probably be lost. So yeah, hold it like this and add your seed bead loop in your clasp, and do the same thing on this side that we did on this side. You'll just be holding it this way. Alright, so this is it. One thing I did want to say before I went is that I did want to try a bracelet with the skull beads and the roses together in one. But these here are 9mm, and I didn't want to use more seed beads in each row. So I needed the 8mm size. These are 6 by 8, so 6 going this way and 8 going that way from hole to hole. So I actually made this one while I was waiting for these two here to come in the mail, the turquoise and the pink. So if I were to do a rose and a skull bracelet, I would probably do the layout just like this, but instead of doing my 8mm pearl here, I would do my 6 by 8mm skull bead. So I would have a round bead between the rose and the skull bead, because if the skull bead was up against the rose, it would bump into his chin on the top, and if it was against his head, it would the flower would just be laying on top of him. It would be hard to see. So I would just do the skull bead in place of these 8mm beads if I were to do a rose and skull bead bracelet, and that would be all out sugar skull bracelet. That would be so cool. I would like to try that. Let me know if any of you try it and post a picture of it on my Facebook page. So thanks for watching this video. Please like this video, leave me a comment, subscribe if you want to see more of my videos, and like me on Facebook. And don't forget to share pictures of the jewelry we've made from my videos on my Facebook page, and follow me on Pinterest. Thanks for watching.